There was a sound in a black woman's kitchen at 7 o'clock at night in 1968 that had nothing to do with Sunday. No choir humming from the radio, no cousin spilling through the screen door, just a cast iron skillet hitting the burner with a clank, and a woman who had been on her feet since 5 that morning, finally letting her shoulders drop an inch as the grease started to talk. Folks like to call what she made next a lazy supper. Family, I need you to understand something before we go one word further. There was not a lazy bone in that woman's body. She had ironed other people's clothes all day, or scrubbed somebody's floor on her knees, or stood on a factory line until the whistle blew. And she came home to a house full of children who were hungry the way only children can be hungry, loud about it, insistent about it. And she had maybe 15-20 minutes before somebody's patience gave out. What she made in that window wasn't laziness. It was a kind of genius the world never gave her credit for. It was love, moving at the speed of survival. Tonight, I want to take you back into that kitchen. Not the Sunday kitchen. You know that one already. I want to take you into the Tuesday kitchen. The Thursday night and there's only $4 left till payday kitchen. Because family, some of the most delicious food this country has ever tasted came out of 15 minutes and a woman who refused to let her babies go to bed without something warm in their stomachs. Hey family, I'm James, and if you're new here, welcome. This is the place we come to remember what folks did before there was a name for any of it. Today we're talking about the quick suppers, the struggle meals, some folks call them now, though nobody called them that back then. Back then it was just called dinner, and you were grateful for it. Before we get into these 12, and family, I promise you, some of these are gonna hit you right in the chest. Do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell if you want it. We're building something here, a place where these memories don't just fade out with the generation that lived them. So, go on and subscribe, and let's get into it. Number 1, fried bologna and rice. Now, I know somebody just laughed. Go on and laugh. But family, let me tell you what fried bologna was in a black household in 1965. It was not a joke, it was a lifeline. A woman would come home, open that refrigerator, and there it was. A roll of bologna wrapped in white butcher paper, maybe from the corner store, maybe from the commissary if her husband worked at the base. She'd slice it thick, cut a little X in the center so it wouldn't curl up on her like a bowl in the pan, and drop it into a skillet that still had a little grease left from breakfast. That bologna would fry up dark at the edges, almost black in the good spots, and the smell of it would crawl down the hallway and get the children moving before she even called them. Meanwhile, there was rice already going. Plain white rice, maybe with a little butter, maybe with the drippings poured right over the top once the bologna came out. That was the whole meal. Fried bologna, rice, maybe a slice of light bread to go alongside it. 15 minutes, start to finish. And children who ate like they'd been served steak. My granddaddy used to say bologna was the working man's steak, and he wasn't lying. Not about the flavor, and not about what it meant to a family that needed to stretch $1 till it screamed. You won't see that today. Bologna's not even sold the same way anymore, thick cut off a roll at the counter. But back then that was Tuesday night salvation. Number 2, corned beef hash with rice, straight from the can. Now, this one, family, this one right here, was a can opener miracle. A can of corned beef hash, Libby's most likely, sitting in the cupboard since the last big grocery trip, dumped straight into a hot skillet and broken up with the edge of a spatula until it started to crisp along the bottom. That was the trick. You didn't just heat it. You let it sit still in that hot grease long enough to get a crust on it, dark and a little crunchy. Because a tired woman knew the difference between food that was just warm and food that had some character to it. She'd crack an egg or two right over the top if there were eggs to spare, let them cook down into the hash, and serve the whole thing over rice with hot sauce on the table for whoever wanted it. Now Big Mama, she used to say, a can in the cupboard was like money in the bank. You didn't touch it unless you had to, but on the nights you had to, you were grateful it was there. That can of corned beef hash sat in kitchens all across this country like a quiet insurance policy. Nobody talked about it. Everybody had one. And on the nights the paycheck hadn't come yet and the icebox was thin, that can was the difference between a house with dinner in it and a house without. Number 3, Vienna sausages, crackers, and a can of pork and beans warmed on the stove. This wasn't even really cooking, and every single one of you watching right now who grew up in a house like the one I'm describing knows exactly what I'm talking about. Little can of Vienna sausages. Some folks said it Vienna. Some folks said it different. Didn't matter. Everybody knew what you meant. Open it up, pour off that jelly, maybe fry the sausages quick in a little butter, if there was time. Maybe not if there wasn't. A sleeve of saltine crackers. A pot of Van Camp's or Bush's beans heated up with a spoonful of sugar, and a little mustard stirred in to make it taste like somebody worked on it. That was supper for a house full of children, on a night their mother had absolutely nothing left to give, and still gave them something anyway. We didn't have much, but we had everything that mattered. And family, sometimes what mattered most on a Thursday night, wasn't a feast. It was that somebody thought of you at all after the kind of day she'd had. A child eating Vienna, sausages off a paper towel at the kitchen table, laughing with his brothers, has no idea he is eating one of the great unrecorded comfort foods of an entire generation. He just knows it's good. That's the whole secret, family. That was always the secret. Number 4, grits and eggs with a little piece of fatback or bacon crumbled through. Now, some of you are going to say, James, that's a breakfast food. And you'd be right, most places. But in a whole lot of black households in the 60s and 70s, grits didn't know what time it was, and neither did the woman making them. If it was quick, if it was filling, if it stretched, it went on the supper table same as the breakfast one. A pot of grits takes maybe 20 minutes if you stir it right, and while that pot was working, she'd fry up whatever pork scrap was in the icebox, fatback, a little bacon, sometimes just the grease left in the pan from the morning, and scramble eggs right in it so they came out rich and a little brown at the edges, not that pale yellow you get from a dry pan. Salt, pepper, a pat of butter melting into the grits until they went from stiff to silk. That whole plate cost pennies and filled a stomach for hours. The whole block would smell it if enough houses were doing the same thing that same night. And there was a kind of comfort in that too, knowing you weren't the only house on the street making do with grits for supper. Everybody was making do. That was just how it was done. Family, before we keep going, I want to ask you something, because I know some of you have a dish in your memory right now that I haven't even gotten to yet. What was the quick supper in your house? The one your mama or your grandmother threw together on the nights there wasn't time or money for anything fancy? Was it something like what I just named? Or was it something all your own, something specific to your family that I've never even heard of? Put it in the comments, family. Tell me the name of it. Tell me who made it. Tell me what it tasted like. I read every single one, and I promise you, somebody else watching this video is going to see your comment and taste their own childhood in it. Number 5, pork and beans doctored up with bacon, onion, and a spoonful of molasses. This is where a can of beans stopped being a can of beans and started being a dish somebody was actually proud of. She'd take that same can of Van Camp's, but this time she had a few extra minutes, maybe 10 instead of 5, and she used them. Diced up a little onion, let it sweat down in bacon grease till it turned soft and sweet. Crumbled in whatever bacon or salt pork she had left. Beans went in the pan, not just a bowl, and she'd let them simmer down with a spoonful of molasses or a splash of Alaga syrup until the sauce thickened up and went dark and glossy. Served over a slice of light bread, or alongside a piece of cornbread, if there was any left from the night before. Now this right here, this is something we need to bring back, family, because there is a whole generation walking around today who has never once doctored up a can of beans in their life, who doesn't know that 10 extra minutes and a little onion can turn something ordinary into something a family remembers 50 years later. That's not a small thing. That's a skill. That's a woman refusing to let cheap mean tasteless. Number 6. Salmon croquettes made from a can, fried up quick and hard on the outside. Now, family, if you know, you know. A can of pink salmon, bones and all, because nobody was throwing away perfectly good calcium, mashed up with an egg, a little cornmeal, or crushed crackers to hold it together. A spoonful of mustard, a little onion if it was in the house, shaped into patties with 2 spoons, quick, no fussing, and dropped into hot grease where they'd crackle and pop, and come out dark golden on both sides, served with rice or grits, or just eaten straight off a plate with hot sauce shook over the top. This was a Friday supper in a lot of houses. Catholic families kept it that way out of habit. And plenty of other families kept it that way just because fish stretch further than meat and a can of salmon costs less than a pound of ground beef most weeks. Child, let me tell you something. Those croquettes were not a consolation prize. Grown men who'd had steak in a restaurant would still ask their mother for salmon croquettes when they came home to visit. That tells you everything you need to know about what 15 minutes of a tired woman's attention could do to a can of fish nobody was impressed by until she got her hands on it. Number 7. Fried Spam and grits, sometimes with a little red-eye gravy made from the drippings. Spam gets talked about like a joke today, family, and I want you to sit with that for a second because it wasn't a joke in 1963. It was a can that didn't need refrigeration, that lasted through a hard month, that a woman could slice thick and fry up crisp on both sides in under 10 minutes flat. She'd pour off most of the grease it left behind, splash in a little coffee, yes, family, coffee, and let it bubble up into a thin, dark, salty gravy that got poured right over grits or rice. That's red-eye gravy, and if you never had it, I am telling you, it is one of the great forgotten flavors of that whole era. Salty, a little bitter, a little sweet where the Spam's own sugar had caramelized in the pan. It sounds strange written down. It tasted like home. My granddaddy worked 6 days a week and never once complained, and on the nights he came in late from a double shift, Spam and grits with that red-eye gravy was what was waiting on him, hot, without him having to ask for it. Number 8. Chicken and dumplings made quick from whatever chicken was left over. Now this one takes a little more than 15 minutes, family, I'll be honest with you, but a woman who knew what she was doing could still have it on the table inside of 30, which in a house with hungry children might as well have been 15. Leftover chicken, maybe from Sunday, maybe just a couple of thighs she'd had in the icebox, torn up into a pot with water, a little bouillon if she had it, an onion cut in half and dropped in whole for flavor and fished back out later. While that came up to a simmer, she rolled out dumplings quick. Flour, a little baking powder, a little milk, no measuring, just hands that knew the feel of dough that was ready, and dropped spoonfuls of it right into the simmering broth where it puffed up soft and heavy, soaking up every bit of that chicken flavor. This right here was the dish that told a child everything was going to be all right, even when it might not have been. There is something about dumplings, family, something about a pot that started with almost nothing and turned into something that filled a whole family's stomach, that says more about a mother's love than a full turkey dinner ever could. Number 9, smothered pork chops, the quick version, done thin cut and fast. Big Mama's Sunday smothered pork chops took hours. You let them simmer low and slow until the meat gave up and fell off the bone. But on a Tuesday, a woman didn't have hours. She had a skillet, thin-cut chops dredged quick in flour with salt and pepper, and maybe a little garlic powder if the tin wasn't empty, and about 6 minutes aside in hot grease until they were done through but still tender. Then the gravy. Flour stirred into the drippings, milk or water poured in, slow scraped up from the bottom of the pan where all that flavor was hiding, seasoned quick and poured right back over the chops in the skillet, served with rice to soak up every drop. It wasn't the Sunday version. Nobody was pretending it was, but it carried the same soul in a fraction of the time, and a family sitting down to it on a Wednesday night felt just as taken care of as they did on the Lord's Day. That's the thing the world forgets, family. You didn't need 3 hours to taste like you were loved. You needed a woman who knew how to make 6 minutes count for something. Number 10. Red beans and rice made quick with a leftover ham hock or a little bit of bacon standing in for the long simmered version. Now the real red beans and rice, the kind they made down in Louisiana, that's an all-day pot, and everybody knows it. But up and down this country, in houses that didn't have all day, women found a way to get the spirit of that dish onto the table in a fraction of the time. Canned kidney beans instead of dried, simmered quick with a little leftover ham or bacon, onion, celery if it was in the icebox, a shake of cayenne, served hot over rice with a piece of cornbread on the side. It wasn't slow cooked. It didn't need to be. Not on a Thursday, not for a family that needed supper on the table in 15 minutes flat. What that dish carried with it, even in its rushed version, was a memory. A woman somewhere passing down the idea that beans and rice, done with a little care, could feed a family better than most anything expensive ever could. Folks don't do this anymore, and that's a shame, family. Nobody teaches their children how to stretch a pot of beans into a meal that tastes like it came from somewhere, from someone, from a whole history of women who knew how to make little into plenty. Number 11. Biscuits and gravy made from nothing but bacon grease, flour, and milk. By the time we get to number 11, family, I want you to notice something. Every single one of these dishes started with almost nothing. And this one might be the plainest of them all, and maybe the most beloved. A jar of bacon grease kept on the back of the stove, saved and reused, never wasted. That grease was where this whole dish began. A spoonful of it in the skillet, flour stirred in till it browned just slightly. Milk poured in, slow, and whisked till it thickened into a gravy. The color of an old porch, black pepper shook and heavy, because pepper was cheap and flavor was not optional. Biscuits made quick, self-rising flour, a little shortening, a little milk, cut with the rim of a jelly glass because nobody owned a biscuit cutter, baked hot and fast, split open, and drowned in that gravy. This was supper on the nights there was truly nothing else in the house. And family, I need you to hear me say this clearly. A child who grew up eating biscuits and gravy for supper, because that's all there was, does not remember that meal as poverty. He remembers it as the taste of his mother's hands. That's the whole truth of it. Number 12. Now this last one, family, I've been saving it, because out of everything I've told you tonight, this is the one that says it all. Pot liquor and cornbread. Now, if you don't know what pot liquor is, let me tell you. Every time a pot of greens cooked down low in a black kitchen, and greens cooked in nearly every kitchen, nearly every week, there was a broth left behind at the bottom of the pot. Dark green, almost black in the right light, thick with the fat of whatever pork had simmered in there, heavy with vitamins. Nobody back then had a word for, but every grandmother knew were there. On the nights there was no meat left, no beans left, no time left, a woman would ladle that pot liquor into a bowl by itself, crumble a hunk of cornbread down into it until the bread soaked up the broth and went soft, and set that bowl in front of her child like it was the finest thing on earth. And family, in a certain kind of way, it was. Because pot liquor and cornbread was not a meal made from leftovers in the way we think of leftovers today. Some sad reheated plate. It was a meal made from what was left after everything good had already been given to somebody else. After the meat went to the man of the house who needed his strength for 6 days of labor. After the biggest portions went to the growing children. After everybody else had been fed first. What was left at the bottom of that pot was hers to give one more time, stretched one more meal further, and she gave it with the same hands, the same care, the same love she put into every Sunday dinner this whole channel has ever talked about. There was nothing lazy about that bowl. There has never been anything lazy in this entire list. There was only a woman, exhausted down to her bones, refusing to let her family go hungry, refusing to let them feel poor, even when the cupboard said otherwise. That family, right there, that is the whole story. I think about those kitchens a lot. I think about the sound of a skillet hitting a hot burner at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and what that sound really meant. It wasn't the sound of a woman who had given up on cooking something real. It was the sound of a woman who understood, better than most of us understand anything today, that love doesn't require an hour. It doesn't require a recipe card or a full pantry or a Sunday's worth of time. Sometimes it only requires 15 minutes, a cast iron skillet, and a refusal to let the people you love go to bed without something warm inside them. We call these dishes lazy now, family, and I want you to think hard about who started calling them that, and why. Because the women who made them weren't lazy a day in their lives. They worked. They carried more than most of us carry now, and they still found a way, night after night, to put something on the table that tasted like they had all the time in the world, even when they had almost none of it at all. That's not laziness, that's mastery. That's love disguised as necessity. And it fed generations of us without ever once asking for a single word of thanks. So the next time somebody in your family says they're too tired to cook, and they reach for a can of something and a skillet, don't you dare call that lazy. Call it what it really is. Call it exactly what your grandmother would have called it. Supper. I'll see you next time, family.